Filmmaking often comes with advice that sounds good, but doesn't always translate into real steps. Inside Indies from Cast and Crew Presents closes that gap by focusing on guidance you can actually apply. The show features filmmakers, producers, accountants, and other industry experts who've worked through the same challenges many creators are facing right now. Whether it's budgeting, navigating incentives, or moving a finished film through festivals and distribution, the discussions offer grounded insights from people who've lived through it themselves. You want more than inspiration. You want strategy, you want clarity, you want the playbook. Listen to Inside Indies from Cast and Crew Presents on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. These are real insights for real filmmakers.
You're living in tenses as well. You're working in a future tense. You go, oh fuck, I know I've got to say murderer in a minute, like murderer, which is so hard for me. So you know that's happening, and then the second you said it, you go, wait, did I say that right? So now you're also living in the past, and then crying, going, oh god, wait, what am I doing acting-wise?
Hello and welcome to another new episode of In the Envelope, the Actors Podcast, where the biggest names in film, television, and theater offer acting lessons and behind-the-scenes insights you won't find anywhere else. I am your host, Backstage Senior Editor Vinnie Mancuso, and joining me today is just one of our best working actors who is having, once again, an extraordinary year, the great Matthew Rhys. A RADA graduate who cut his teeth on stage with co-stars like Anthony Hopkins and Kathleen Turner, Matthew was introduced to an even larger audience with his 6th-season Emmy-winning turn as KGB spy Philip Jennings on The Americans. Since then, he has continued to be a consistently incredible presence on both the big and small screen. Most recently, that has meant going outside of his usual material twice, back-to-back. First, in the Netflix miniseries The Beast in Me as the chilling real estate exec accused of killing his wife, and then on the Apple TV Plus horror comedy Widow's Bay, where he plays, with pure slapstick energy, the mayor of a New England island that is home to a whole host of paranormal activity. There's some slight Widow's Bay spoilers here, but I cannot recommend catching up with that show enough. Please do. This is just a really wonderful chat with an incredibly open, candid actor, touching on everything from these two amazing projects down to the real nitty-gritty details of how he has learned to craft a performance over the years. Let's get right into it. Here is Matthew Rhys. Matthew, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you, Vinny?
Good. I'm so glad to have you here. I just gotta say right off the bat, I tell people that I'm more of a movie person than a TV person, so it takes a bit to really get me into like committing to a show. And I got to say that I've become really obsessed with Widow's Bay.
Oh, good.
It is truly delightful. My favorite description of it, I just saw this recently in reviews. Somebody said it's like the closest we're going to get to a live action Courage the Cowardly Dog. I don't know if that's a frame of reference that you're familiar with.
Sadly, I'm not. Can you talk me through it? I feel like I've let you down already.
No, it's totally fine. It's a Cartoon Network show from like the early 2000s. It's just like about a cartoon dog that's really doing its best to make it through like a series of paranormal experiences. And it's this performance from you that is so unexpected that I think that people are really grabbing onto this character who is truly doing his best to make it through these series of paranormal experiences.
Well, I'm obviously going to look up that cartoon now, and if there's a season 2, I'll base the performance on it.
If there's anything we can get out of this, me introducing you to Courage the Cowardly Dog is a gigantic win in my book. Yeah. I'm so happy we're talking today because I believe episode 5 comes out today. And this episode's coming out literally tomorrow. So I think that people will have seen it and they know that you're giving in this episode you're giving a very committed performance of somebody tripping on mushrooms. I just want to sort of to dive right into like what it is like to film a performance like that, because it's this is a very slapsticky sort of like committed big swing performance. So on the day, as an actor, Take us through a day like that.
Obviously I had big reservations about this episode. I played drunk before, and I have played high before, and twice I think, and both times, with varying degrees of success and failure. So I relied heavily on Sam Donovan, who's an incredible director, and just literally said, "Listen, just tell me where the dial is, and if it's too much, turn it down or bring it up, or you let me know." And I trusted him implicitly. And he would say, "Yeah, that was a little too much. Let's try a little smaller version of that." And we kind of, it was the entire show. I think we will continue till the bitter end, going, "Is this right? Is this right?" Because it is such a unique show. And I watched YouTube videos of people when they're high and people who'd been experimented on with LSD and things like that. And
I'm sure there's more of those out there than people would expect.
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, YouTube is I know I sound like my grandfather now, but I started acting at a time where you would travel to the place where you were to research with a dictaphone and go to their local library. And that's how you did it. And then YouTube came along, and now it's like, oh my God, the wealth is ridiculous. So I kind of stole little bits from YouTube clips I saw, and then I got really high.
No, there you go. I mean, research is important, but you can't fake the real thing.
I am curious. I'm very method.
I'm curious when it's a sort of dial performance like that, like take me up or down. Do you like to start up here and take it down, like give them your 10 and then take it down, or especially on camera, is it helpful to like start here and then let's do a little bit more?
What's funny, I remember on this one, I remember thinking, I'm going to start small and go up. And then I did one take, and Sam was like, "Okay, let's bring this down." I was like, "Oh boy!" I was like, "Oh,
down to where?"
I was like, "Oh, I'm way off. The barometer is way off." Okay, yep, no problem. I was like, if I was planning on scaling up, I've got this very wrong.
I love that. I mean, it's one of those interesting things of like whether you're playing drunk or you're playing high or anything like that. The advice that I've heard is that you're actually playing, like trying to hide it, because that's usually, and that's kind of the beauty of this performance is the entire episode is your character trying to interact with other human beings as normally as possible.
Yeah. Also, the writing was so specific, and Katie Dippold is a rare genius, and her stage directions were incredibly helpful. They're real signposts in the road in that respect.
Whenever I hear an actor say something like that, how helpful the script is and stuff like that, I'm always curious as a writer and as somebody who's hosting the show, both writers and actors listen to it. What is the sort of mark of a helpful script? What is the difference between like a stage direction that is helpful to you as an actor versus, something you kind of have to parse through?
Yeah, I think there's an age-old discussion about the stage directions as to a lot of the time they are put in to help advise or guide producers, executive producers, as to what the tone is of that scene. And especially when you're trying to get something made, you kind of like to steer the readers in a way. And then the last kind of group of people to receive that, the actors, will be the first group to go, "No, that's not for me at all." So for the most part, and then they get left in the script, obviously, and then you, as an actor, you read through, you go, "Well, I'm not doing that," or "I don't agree with that," or "That's weird. I'd like to try something a little more to the opposite of that." But with Katie Dippold, her kind of guiding of a script is so specific, and this very kind of fragile line of comedy that she threads, this kind of magical comedy thread that she kind of weaves through the whole thing, is basically for all. And she's telling you the tone she would like, not necessarily you need to do. 99% of the time I agreed with it, and it would make me laugh. And I was like, oh my God, that is so spot on. I wouldn't have actually thought of that. So I was always very happy to take her guidance. And even if there was a slightly more oblique moment and you enter and you go, "What is this?" And she explains, you go, "Oh my God, right. That's very funny."
I love that. I do kind of want to just back it up to because a lot of people who listen to the show are, aspiring actors, and we kind of like to get the where you are now is so exciting. We kind of want to see the entire way to get here. I do want to ask about something that maybe something only I beat is only interesting to me, but I read a bunch of old interviews you've done and stuff like that, and stories you've told, and a story I sort of found super interesting is, and I'm not sure how much of this is accurate, but I believe you said that when you first came to do Columbo, Peter Falk picked you up at LAX.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about what you and Peter Falk talked about on the drive home from LAX.
I plagued him with questions about Cassavetes' Facebook, which he was very happy to talk about. And then we kind of ran through, because I was playing the murderer. I kind of asked him I said, who are the murderers that, because he's had a lot of famous murderers. And then I was like, who was your favorite murderer? And he was like, Billy Connolly. And I was like, Billy Connolly? He's like, yeah. He goes, that bastard made me laugh too much. And then he would talk about golf and how proud he was of the day that he and Seve Ballesteros kind of beat two pros in a pro celebrity golf tournament. He talked about everything, talked about life and his wife and acting. And what I loved at 76, he was about 76, how committed he was to acting then. That he wanted to rehearse for Columbo. We did about a week's rehearsal for Columbo. And he's still breaking down scenes and asking me what I want in this moment. And I was like, oh, wow, he still loves it. And this show has been going since 1969. And he still is committed, or seemingly as he was then, to this moment. It was a real lesson for me that you have to turn up with the same work ethic every day.
That's really, really lovely. And it kind of reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about, is something you said, I think recently, was about, you do, when you talk, people like to ask you about process.
Yeah.
And you were saying, the further you get in your career, the more you sort of have less of a process. You said you sort of just pretend really hard. I'm curious about what that means to you at this point, having less process as you go on.
Yeah. I think having a process, especially in my early 20s, coming out of drama school, where we'd had a very kind of American-based process, kind of a very heavily based on Stella Adler, which is great. I thought it was an incredible toolkit for me, because what it does, and I realize in retrospect, is it gives you an incredible crutch. It's a wonderful safety net. And as most of us were and still are plagued and riddled with insecurity and self-doubt, it gives you this armor. You kind of go, okay, well, I've done my work, so I'm safe. And that helped enormously. And also, if you've broken down the script to the degree which it called for you to do, when you go in, it gives you a great freedom when you're then told to kind of divert from that. If you go, okay, well, we're going to improvise this thing. You've done so much work. You're free to do that. The work is done and it's in. So you kind of go, great. Then you can do whatever. And I realized I kind of instinctively now will look at read a script and I go, okay, that's my super objective. Those are my scenic actions. I can do that now slightly more instinctively. And when I worked with Anthony Hopkins, he has he kind of began that idea of me of just pretending, because he goes, look, if you read your script 250 times, all you have to do is give yourself over to an imaginary set of circumstances, and that's it. And I was like, oh, yeah. Because
sounds so easy.
Yeah, I know. But you just need to be Anthony Hopkins as well.
Yeah, it does help. I'm curious if that was a hard thing to let go. It does sound scary to an actor who really relies on their process and stuff to sort of trust yourself. And I'm curious about when that first started to feel like something that was working for you. Is be like, maybe I could just trust the work instead of
Yeah. When I realized, I was in my 30s, and I was working on a script, and usually I'd do my columns on every page, would militantly and diligently write my columns, wherever who says what about me, what do I want, where have I come from, brr. And then I realized I haven't done my columns. And then I was like, oh my God, I haven't done my columns in years. I was like, oh wow. And that was look, I'm not the sharpest tool in the book. So it took me a few years to go, oh right, I haven't been doing that. So it's kind of more instinct now. And good writing, it'll present itself anyway. So yeah, I don't know, I just kind of relaxed a bit in my 30s and went, I don't have to be doing push-ups before every take. I don't need to be I don't have to feel it. If you don't feel it, that's okay. and being kind of slightly kinder to yourself and forgiving yourself a little more by going, if I'm not feeling everyone on every take, that's okay too.
It's amazing what happens when you can relax. It's just amazing.
I mean, when you do relax, the best work starts to come. I remember Richard Burton saying, some of my best work has always been when I've been tired and when you have no extra energy to be nervous. But I also think you're just a lot more relaxed when you are tired because you kind of, give yourself over a little. You're a little more open in a way.
Absolutely. I am curious because, you mentioned the formal training at RADA and stuff like that. Is there a nugget from the formal training that is still helpful? Because I know that when you go through drama school, you're just bombarded with things, and some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. Is there something that has stuck from then until now?
I mean, the general ethos which is what Peter Falk adhered to, is you have to, and those I've learned from like great number ones on the call sheet, like Sally Field, Tom Hanks, Anthony Hopkins, is you have to do the work, right? Well, regardless of whether you're easing off your process, like Hopkins's process is to read the script many, 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 many times. That's a phenomenal amount of work, but it gives you a knowledge and an understanding of the script that you would not necessarily if you'd just done your columns and read it 3 times. Do you know what I mean? You still have to do the work. You still have to know your lines inside out so that there's freedom and you can be relaxed, because you can't be relaxed if you're struggling for your lines. And don't get me wrong, there are days when I struggle for my lines, but for the most part, I think that was like a bigger revelation to me. It's like going, oh, you need to learn your lines so well. That's when you can relax. More than doing your columns or figuring out what your inner obstacle is. Know your lines inside out, which is that definitely I learned from Hopkins, because there's such freedom in knowing them better than breathing.
This is just getting extreme, just directly into the weeds at this point, but it is the stuff that the people listening to the show care about. But do you have a technique for memorizing lines?
So I have this thing. I've gone through my entire career asking every actor what their line memorization thing is, because seemingly with each new job, I have a new way of learning lines. Because I'm like, that last one wasn't great for me. And Pedro Pascal has that one where he writes down in a kind of vertical column the first letter of each line. And then when he looks at that letter, it cues him as to what that line is. I tried that, and that to a degree has its own merits too. Sometimes I just do it with on voice memo with the iPhone. Other times I write it out. If I'm struggling, I write out copious amounts of times. I repeat. I pace. I walk. I still don't have my one method that gets me there that I know will work. I'm still feeling like I'm at sea about line learning, bizarrely.
Whatever works for that role, basically.
Kind of. And I think, writing to me is obviously so individual, but the different writing goes in different ways. Sometimes you notice a writer has a syncopation almost in the sound, and you can latch onto that. Others where the meaning is so clear, the intention is so clear, you kind of latch onto the meaning as opposed to the words themselves. I skin the cat in many different ways, to use a terrible analogy.
Filmmaking often comes with advice that sounds good, but doesn't always translate into real steps. Inside Indies from Cast and Crew Presents closes that gap by focusing on guidance you can actually apply. The show features filmmakers, producers, accountants, and other industry experts who've worked through the same challenges many creators are facing right now. Whether it's budgeting, navigating incentives, or moving a finished film through festivals and distribution, the discussions offer grounded insights from people who've lived through it themselves. You want more than inspiration. You want strategy, you want clarity, you want the playbook. Listen to Inside Indies from Cast and Crew Presents on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. These are real insights for real filmmakers. It's interesting. I assume from drama school onward, you kind of have to have go-to things for auditions and stuff. Like a monologue or anything. Is there stuff that's just like stuck in your head that you'll always have memorized, or does that stuff also go with each role?
No. There's a monologue from Henry VI Part 3, which was my the monologue I did for all the drama schools I applied to, and then continued to work on throughout 3 years of drama school. That still, and all, yeah, I remember I auditioned for Oliver Stone once, and he went, I know this, it was for Alexander the Great. And he was like, I don't suppose you have a Shakespeare memorized, do you? I do, actually. And I remember thinking, my God, after all those years, I actually didn't get the fucking part.
but you had it.
But I had it and I could do it. And I remember thinking, God, like there's something to just... And there's some of the older actors who always said, keep learning poetry, keep learning Shakespearean monologues. But you're just keeping your blade sharp.
Yeah, I mean, it's a muscle.
Yeah, totally.
I did see that thanks to Beast in Me, I don't know if this is entirely accurate, but you are OSHA verified in the state of New Jersey.
I am. For another 2 years, I believe. Yeah. And I did it on my 50th birthday.
Look at that. See? Never too late to learn something. I am curious if there's something you had in your research and anything like that turned out to be the most helpful thing. I don't know if it's being OSHA verified, but is there anything else you've learned for a role that turned out to be kind of helpful either for your career or just in life?
We did a lot of fencing and sword fighting at drama school. That certainly has helped, just because just simple things like coordination of footwork and basic fight choreography. That has always helped. The awareness in fight choreography has helped, not just for sword fighting, but any fighting really. That did help a lot. Like I'm always saying, young actors are like, what's your piece of advice? I'm always like, do a weekend circus skills. Have an 8-week fencing course. Just keep adding to the toolbox, because it's not necessarily specific, but there'll be elements of whatever you learn will always apply to something else. Take a couple of horse riding lessons. Make sure you can drive, swim, anything that'll possibly give you an edge in an audition over one person who doesn't.
Or just being, aware of your body. Like stuff like that is just like having your physicality down it compounds, and then you just sort of more in your body if you're able to control it like that.
Of course, as much as part of your, it's as much as the tool as your voice is.
I mean, just as we're mentioning Beast in Me, I another remarkable performance that is over this past year. It's just been so interesting for you. I saw you talking about filming a 10-page scene for that show across from Claire Danes, and I feel like when people who don't have the experience on set hear these terms and hear these ideas, that they're like, what does that even mean? So I'm just curious about like, what is the logistics of filming a 10-page scene, where it's largely just you and Claire Danes across from each other? Like what is that day like for you when you show up and you're like, we have a 10-page scene here to do today?
Terrifying. It is terrifying because for many reasons. I'd rehearsed with Claire, so I knew her preparation is absolute. She is so focused on set and so in control and command of what she's doing in her performance, and doesn't. I'm not saying she demands it, but I just think those people, as a result of the way they conduct and hold themselves, do demand it of others. They're holding up the gold standard, so you have to follow suit. So I knew that was my second day, and I knew she would come in ready to go. So I can't remember how I did it, but I learned those 10 pages. It was also my second day, so I was very nervous. They were very smart because the director, Antonio Campos, went, this scene is so intrinsic to the entire show and to who they are and what their relationship is. He asked for 2 days to shoot it, because it does have that other piece where I smashed the iPhone, but that's a very brief moment. Now I know, because it's 2 people sat at a table, they could have gone, we can do that in the morning, which we could have in a very standard way with very standard coverage. But they went, this scene is kind of a touchstone for the 2 of them, a foundation stone for the 2 of them. So we want time on it. We want to shoot a lot of angles on it. We want to be able to play with it, which is the greatest luxury of all. So that's what we did. We had it over 2 days whereby we really took our time in rehearsing it, finding the right tone of it, finding the right beats of it, and then playing those beats even when filming, which was like I said, a real luxury. And so it's twofold, because in many ways you go, oh my God, thank God we've got 2 days to shoot this. And then you realize it's slightly more of a marathon where you have to hold your concentration over 2 days, where as opposed to a short sprint of a morning. Unclear things can hold that kind of molten focus for months, let alone 2 days. So I just, it was, I did feel a bit tired at the end of those 2 days, but glad we'd had 2 days to do it.
Amazing. I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but both Beast and Me and Widow's Bay are fair to say, like, both sort of unexpected sides of you as an actor. You know, it's stuff I'm curious about, you know, just to get into that idea, like what the desire to do things that are not expected of you, when I have to assume, like, when you do something well, that's what people offer you. You know, they want more of that. So what is that desire to keep stretching yourself as an actor, like, you know, over the course of your career, and especially now?
I mean, that's the great, is always what I've wanted, basically, a great variety of work, like, and to explore, you know, different parts of yourself, and kind of stretch muscles and flex them, or in the hope that you can. I'm not necessarily saying you can, but that's the daunt and the allure of it, is to kind of go, I would love to do parts that really push me. Whether or not I can pull them off is something else. But that to me is the true luxury in to play, especially like you say, Beast and Me and Widow's Bay were 2 parts that felt very different to me, not usually the norm of what I'm offered either. So to that was a great thrill, that was done, and a daunt as well. You know, that you go, you know, these are parts and projects that I could easily fall flat on my face on. So you just hope that you can pull it off. But to do that kind of variety within that short space of time was something I'd always hoped my career would be.
I'm curious about, you know, whenever I talk to an actor who has like a very exciting time, you know, this is just those two things back to back, you know, are just, like you said, it's a thrill. During that period, does it ever get you thinking about, you know, a time in your career where you didn't sort of have the option of like choosing the roles like that, like back when it was sort of like you had to take the job? So like, does the moment now ever make you think about, you were thinking about wanting this period of your career?
Oh, totally. And it gives you the appreciation that it should, that for not just years, decades of kind of just taking whatever job I could. And don't get me wrong, I've played incredible parts from an early age, and been very grateful for that. Just not necessarily parts I thought were a massive stretch, or some things I've never done before. I've never done comedy till Widow's Bay. And I'd never really played the bad guy really till Beast and Me. And so, yeah, it just gives you an appreciation of all those years, not just the years when you were taking any job, but when you didn't have a job, that to kind of do this is a great luxury.
I mean, you mentioned that this is a slight introduction to comedy for you. But it's something that feels very natural to you. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell. And so there's parts of this show that I'd love to ask about. And specifically, there's a scene with you and a recliner and a sea hag. That's just a wonderful bit of slapstick. And I'm just kind of curious about, again, what is because on the day, I know that things that involve physicality like that, you know, they probably don't feel as funny in the moment. So like, what is filming something like that like on the day, on set, you know, where you're like kind of trusting, you're like, I hope this translates?
Well, that thought and feeling was very prevalent, in that you're like, oh my God, is this going to work? Because, you know, we'd rehearsed it with, you know, with 2 sea hags, the original sea hag and stunt sea hag, and a pneumatic recliner that had been built by special effects to launch stunt sea hag. And so
I love the term stunt sea hag.
Although, you know, I have to say, as soon as I knew, when the project came my way and they said Hiro Murai is directing the first 3, I was like, oh, we're gold. Because I just knew it was going to be okay. Because he's like a savant. He's like a true filmmaker. But even when his not necessarily departures, when whatever he does live on the kind of extremes, there's a incredible, they're tethered and real and anchored, and there's a reality to them. And the first Zoom I had with him, he immediately said, look, all we're doing is we're creating a real world with real people, with real backstories, and we're playing for real, and that's it. It's no different to any drama. We're not playing comedy or horror. We're just creating a real world and playing it for real. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. How obvious, but how right. And that was very reassuring. And that's what, then you're kind of, I think it gives you a freedom. It kind of gives you a real kind of sense of freedom. Like, you can take a bigger swing if it's grounded in a real place, because it should come very organically then. And that was the hope. And so the launching of the Sea Hag was definitely one of the more moments where I was like, hey, will this literally land in the correct way? But with Hero, I just kind of trusted in he's always giving you those notes that are pushing you to kind of explore the reality of the moment and the kind of the real terror, the real whatever. The preface is always real, the prefix is always real. So when he's doing that, it always feels very grounded. However absurd or farcical the moment may necessarily seem, it's always grounded in a very real way.
I want to give you a compliment that might not sound like a compliment right now, but you're obviously very good at playing an American. It is a very been a part of your career. You're literally on the Americans, but like, you know, especially, there's a very real feeling to a small town leader in this show. So I'm curious, what you found the key to playing American is, whatever that may mean in that role.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I tend to base most of my, not base, but a lot, I always go, who does this remind me of? And most of the people I know, I base those characters on, are from Wales. So I just think it's intrinsically universal themes, just with an American accent. Although the American accent is still a work in progress for me. Still, I don't sit on its laurels and go, I can do it now. It still catches me out. It still throws me. Certain words in certain orders will still throw me. It's weird. I have this ongoing question in my brain where so much of your brain, one massive part of your brain is working on a sound. And before you even say the word, you go, hang on, what's the sound for that? That it almost detracts you from acting. And I always go, is that good or bad? It's like, in a way, like, I had an acting teacher who's always like, what you want to do is do things to yourself that will stop you acting. And I go, all right, so you're just being real. And like, I think it was Hagen is always saying, like, start the scene with something real that's physical. Like, put a letter in an envelope, a ball tube socks, or so, whatever. Anything that'll just begin the scene with stopping you from being aware of yourself and acting. And I always wonder, like, if doing the American accent does that. Is it an aid to me that I'm working so much on something else, it's taking me out to the artifice in a way? I don't know.
It's the crazy split brain thing of acting that is kind of hard to describe. Is like, you're still in there.
Yeah.
You're thinking as yourself, but you're also living as this other person. So it's always interesting of like the idea of being like, as you're saying something, thinking, am I saying this right?
Right.
Also, as if you're saying it for the first time.
Yes, because you're living in tenses as well. You're living in you're working in a future tense. You go, oh fuck, I know I've got to say murderer in a minute, like murderer, which is so hard for me. So that's happening, and then the second you said it, you go, wait, did I say that right? So now you're also living in the past, and then going, oh god, wait, what am I doing acting wise? So there's this, it's a good thing I have such neurodiversity.
It all works. It all works out in the end. Whatever's captured, it has been working.
Knock on wood.
Exactly. I do want to ask because, like I said, I was reading all types of interviews you've done. There's a very early one where somebody asked you, I think you were like still in your 20s at the point, like what your motto would be. And you mentioned the phrase, keep hitting and the rock will break, which is that still a motto that means something to you?
No, totally. You just gotta chip away at it. You've got, like, in your off times as well, we're not working. You got to keep, like I say, you keep doing that other stuff. But in a business that is so brutal, you just have to keep hitting the rock, because it's the only, you need, I remember this one acting teacher said, you need to have the sensitivity to feel it and to not let the other stuff affect you. It's like having the hide of the rhino and the kind of the soul of the artist. You need both, because without the hide of the rhino, you won't survive this business. But you can't let it harden you to where the artist on the inside is affected.
Which is a very hard balance. You kind of need to leave yourself open, but when you leave yourself open,
you'll get
take
punched.
rejection.
Yeah,
exactly. As we come to the sort of end of this conversation, I'm always curious because I know that, I'm asking people to talk about themselves for 40 to an hour, and it's, nobody enjoys that. So I do just want to sort of end off here of when you look back at your career recently or further, anything, whether there's a moment that sticks out to you for, a time when you were just very grateful for your scene partner, the person working across from you. What springs to mind when you think about that?
Oh my God. I'd say there's a solid 4 or 5 scene partners that I've really learned from. I did a stage version of The Graduate in West End in London with Kathleen Turner as my Mrs. Robinson. She was one. Sally Field was another. Tom Hanks and Anthony Hopkins. And it sort of sounds like I'm dropping names, but what you realize is they're very successful because they have this work ethic. And that's it's what they share. They have this voracious work ethic that you have to put the work in order to get it right. And that's why I kind of look back and I'm grateful to those for like teaching me, being real teachers and going, you have to do the work now in order for it to work. So do the work. And that's what I always remember and kind of thank them for.
Love that. Well, like I said, Matthew, this was truly a pleasure. I cannot wait to talk again down the road, for Widow's Bay or whatever comes next. But for now, this was so lovely. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Vinnie. Yeah, thanks a million. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks, as always, to our brilliant producer, Jamie Muffett, and to the whole team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Kasey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget you can subscribe to Backstage with code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. 100% free, you simply cannot beat that. For more exclusive content, find us on Facebook and Twitter at In the Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who should we interview next? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another peek in the envelope.